Okay, so today, this event, EAAA Back to Basics, really aims to just provide a bit more insight into what it is that we do. Pre-hospital emergency medicine is, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, is a very complex area of work. It's fast-paced, it's ever-changing, and what we want to do today is just run through a bit more of our operation, how we do things, a bit more about the EAAA way, and hopefully, whether you know a little bit already or thought you knew a lot, then there'll be something that you can learn. We've got one of our amazing founders on the call as well, Jerry Hermer, so he can either tell me things that are wrong or he can correct us where need be. But hopefully, you might learn something as well, Jerry. And I'm joined today by two amazing members of our crew. So first up, we've got Captain Martin Polding. Give us a wave, Martin. There we go. So thank you so much for joining us. Captain Martin Polding started flying over 30 years ago, initially flying Sea Kings with the Navy, before moving to Surrey and flying with the police, and then doing some offshore oil rig transfers at Babcock next door to EAAA. And then got enticed by the work that we do from having working next door to us and started working with us about 4 years ago, and is currently our regional managing pilot. So he looks after line manages all the pilots and provides kind of pilot relief as needed as well. And then we've got Dr. Neil Berry, who is one of our consultant doctors, been working with us for nearly 10 years now. Is also a consultant in anaesthesia at Ipswich Hospital and does a huge amount to raise money and awareness for the charity. So thank you for that, Neil. And also likes to put in the odd triathlon attempt as and when he's got a few moments or two. So quite the busy man. But thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And let's just get started, really. So I want to start with where it all begins, which is our sole goal is to be there for people during their darkest hour, often when they've experienced life-threatening accidents or injuries. And our involvement starts with one thing, and that's when the big red telephone rings out throughout both of our bases, or one of our bases in Norwich or Cambridge, alerting us that someone needs us. And Neil, perhaps you can tell us a bit more about what happens in the moments before the phone goes off, and then kind of what the crew do once it starts ringing.
Yes, yeah, of course, I'll expand on all of that. But first of all, nice to see you all, and nice to get the chance to kind of speak with you all. I suppose really you should talk about call handling and how the jobs are handled in the east of England. So if you make a 999 call, all the calls get sent to a central calling centre. In that calling centre, we have a critical care paramedic, so that can quite often be one of our team, or it can be one of the other air ambulance teams that sits down there scanning through all the ambulance calls that come in. Now, they're looking for codes that denote certain kind of injuries, but they're also looking at everything, really, looking at descriptions of what's happening to see about whether an enhanced care team may be required. Now, people taking your call are standard call takers, so they're not medically trained. They're trained in a script, and that's why they'll be very strict going through the script of, tell me, is the patient conscious, is the patient's breathing, and they will be noting this stuff down that then the critical care paramedic can actually look into and make a decision based on whether it's a job that we might be able to help with. Bearing in mind, there'll be on average probably about 3,500 calls to the ambulance service in a 24-hour period. It's a busy job for them to scan through those and pick out the ones that they think we may be of benefit to. So once they've picked out a job that they think, right, that needs an enhanced care team, doctor, paramedic, for whatever reason, then they will pass it on to the dispatcher. The dispatcher will then look at where the location is. They'll look at where the nearest available resource is. So they'll pick the nearest air ambulance. Now, that may not be the nearest air ambulance base because they might be out on the job. So we will cross cover each other throughout the entire region. But the nearest air ambulance that's available, and they will then make the red call through to the red phone in our crew rooms. We at that point will have been doing our checks, getting our equipment ready, doing our team brief, practicing drills, practicing equipment, doing what we normally do. And then as soon as that red phone goes, it's all action stations. Normally, I think Martin will chat in a sec about the pilots bit, but normally one of the pilots will go straight out and start the helicopter. either myself or the paramedic will take the call and find out some details, and then we will get ourselves ready to get onto the helicopter if it is indeed the helicopter that we're taking, rather than the rapid response vehicle. The other pilot will generally stay, look at the grid, look at where it is, look at whether there's suitable landing spots, double check the weather and safety, so that we can fly there safely. I think probably, Martin, do you want to speak a little bit about your role when the phone goes off?
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that at the very start of the shift, in order to be able to respond expeditiously when the phone rings at the start of the shift when we come in, we will do some aircraft checks. We have 2 pilots on shift. That will involve a ground run where we test all of the aircraft systems that we can on the ground, and we do a full check and a ground run and check radios, for example, so that when that red phone does go, then we can do effectively a quick start, and we can be, from the phone ringing, it can be a matter of minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, to being airborne. So at the start of the day, we do that thorough aircraft check, and then we will check the weather, which will be obviously a big factor for the course of the day. And then we'll just do some planning in terms of fuel, the aircraft weight and balance. Also checking airspace. So around the region, there are some military training areas, danger areas, and other activities going on, parachute dropping, for example. So we need to be cognizant of all of those things as well. So anyway, when the phone goes, as Neil pointed out, there's 2 pilots. So one will straight away go and start the aircraft. The other then will wait. The big question we want at that moment in time is, what's the grid reference? And then we will plot that 6-figure grid reference into our iPads that we carry, and then that will plot the location on a map. The iPads are brilliant. They have a variety of maps from quite a big scale right through to like ordnance survey level and street maps. So we'll plot the grid. If the weather is an issue on the day, then the pilot monitoring or doing the planning will then assess the suitability of that given the weather and the fuel that we carry, and then have that discussion with the clinical team on shift, and then from that moment we'll walk out to the aircraft and we'll be on our way. And as I say, that we're talking a matter of minutes. I think about sort of 3 minutes on average for a job in the day. It's a different. I'm sure we'll talk about night operations later on, but it will obviously take that much longer at night, just because it's. We need to take a bit more time, and there's a bit more complexity for night shifts. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's brilliant, thank you. And I suppose what we didn't start with is that there's, as when Martin said, there's 2 pilots. We have our captain and then the co-pilot, and we have a doctor and a critical care paramedic. I wonder, can each of you just tell us a bit more about the backgrounds, what leads someone to come to work at the air ambulance?
Yeah, it's. I think probably I'll just start with the fact that the most people don't really realise the difference when you phone 999. People expect an ambulance resource to come, and that one ambulance resource equals another, and they're all very much the same. When you make a 999 call, it can range very much from very junior technicians that are basically trained in first aid and being able to drive an ambulance, up through to qualified paramedics. You then go on to critical care paramedics who have advanced skills such as sedation and anaesthesia, and then right up to the top level, which is the critical care doctor model, which is what we run with the air ambulance. So you do get a very different response depending on what's dispatched. The I'll probably speak for the doctor part because that's what I've been through, but the most of the doctors are ED doctors or anaesthetic doctors, generally because you need to be able to deliver immediate life-saving interventions as you would in the emergency department. You also be able to need to manage a critical care type patient as you would with anaesthetics. We've had the odd surgeon. I'm actually surgically trained before I then went into anaesthetics, so there is a little bit of variety, but generally ED and anaesthetics. And I think for the most part, we're generally the can-do kind of attitude, really quite positive, quite active people, quite practical, quite practically minded. Paramedics, they go through a different structure, so it's now all a degree course to be a paramedic. You used to be able to go through a kind of vocational course, but now they're all degree level. They then have to, after they've done their paramedic training for a certain amount of time, they have to apply to join the critical care paramedic scheme. That involves further degrees, further training, further exams. So they really are kind of, they're the pinnacle of the paramedic specialty.
Brilliant, thank you. Martin, what about you? As I mentioned your career briefly, is that quite common across the pilots we have to start with the military background?
Yes, I think across our bases at Norwich and Cambridge, roughly about half of the pilot cohort are ex-military, and that's from across. I mean, I'm ex-Navy. I spent 20 years in the Navy, but Navy, Air Force, and Army. So there is some good banter between the different ex-services. I suppose it does kind of lend itself to the military specializations in terms of low-level flying. Overland by day, by night, using night vision goggles, landing in unprepared sites, and all of the skills that are required to assess and land the aircraft safely. I think if I think of the military pilots, some left the military directly and came into the air ambulance, and I think and it very much does lend itself to the sort of military style of flying. Others, like myself, I did a stint with the police, and I also flew offshore. So I've done a variety of different roles. I think what attracts all of us to the air ambulance is that it covers professionally as well a multitude of disciplines that you may do one of those things in a different role, but this encompasses everything from flying, say, day, night, on instruments, in cloud. And so it's a really challenging and dynamic environment, which is a great professionally. And obviously, it goes without saying, the job satisfaction is tremendous, and to be able to, the end result, to be able to help and support people is wonderful as well. I'll just go back though. The other the remaining pilots mostly are self-funded, which it's very expensive, and I take my hat off to the people who do that. It can cost, it's definitely in the six-figure region for a pilot to get their commercial pilot's license, and could take up to a year to do that. And then pilots doing that, there is no guarantee of a job at the end of it. They have a license, but most people require experience as well in the role, and that's probably why you get a lot of ex-military types, certainly as captains, flying the helicopters, because they come with a lot of the prerequisite experience. I personally like the balance. I think it's really healthy to have a mix of people from different backgrounds. All of the co-pilots that we have now are either self-started or have come through a cadet program. And I think one of the other benefits of flying multi-pilot is that the co-pilots can come with relatively little experience and get exposure to all of these different flying disciplines, and will be the captains of the future. So we are growing our own captains, and we've certainly had two of the captains at the moment, one at Norwich, one at Cambridge, were started as co-pilots and have now stepped up to that role as well.
That's brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it's such a vast number of ways that people can come to us. But yeah, we're very grateful that you all do turn up here in the end. So thank you. I want to go back then a bit to go back to the missions, and you mentioned briefly, Neil, about we decided whether to take the rapid response vehicle or our helicopters. Do you want to just tell us a bit more about what's involved in the decisions, and just to highlight to people, we have at each base we have a helicopter, an H145, and we also have a rapid response vehicle which carries exactly the same equipment. So perhaps you just give us an insight into how you decide which one to take.
Yeah, of course, because I mean, in this timeline, we've not even left the building yet, have we? So we're a bit behind our 3-minute aspiration to get out. So when the call goes, the key job really for us as the air ambulance is to get the doctor and the paramedic to the patient in need as quick as possible. So we need to look at timelines really. If the job is very local, very quick to get to by jumping in the car, we may take that. Now we've got a fully equipped RRV. It carries everything on the Volvo, which is super fast, brilliant car. It has exactly the same stuff that it has on the helicopter, so we don't compromise the care by taking one rather than the other. It's really just a location-based thing, and actually I'd say probably more than location-based, it's weather dependent. So the car is not as affected by weather limits as the helicopter may be. Safety is one of our is the key. We can't have crews or anybody else being injured. So if we are out of weather limits, then we will take the car. Even if it's local jobs though, we may still take the helicopter if it's something in the centre of Cambridge, but the key determinant for that will be discussing with the pilot. So when that phone goes, giving them a grid as early as possible, they may say, actually, yes, that's in a house. It's right next to a massive park. We'll be up and down. And let's say it's 5 o'clock in the evening and it's rush hour. We're going to be there quicker than you can drive. And actually, then it gives us other possibilities when we're there about going to the right hospital. A lot of people think that we kind of think a lot about the content of the call, and which influences our decision. Actually, for me as a doctor, the paramedic quite often takes the call because they're sat near the phone. I don't even know what we're going to until we're en route. We won't even discuss it. We'll just get into the platform that we're going on and then go, and we'll find out on the way. And also that information can be very misleading and is quite often not what we actually find when we get there. I think one that sticks in the memory was we were tasked to a 80-year-old gentleman who'd had a road traffic collision with a caravan. That's what it came through on the job. When we actually got on scene, this was an 8-month-old cardiac arrest in a caravan. So as you can imagine, very, very different. But the kit we take is always the same. We never load things just because of a certain incident. We carry everything for everything in both platforms. So yeah, I think the short answer is that we can, bad weather, good weather, we can get there. It just may be a lot faster and smoother by the helicopter.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, it's quite a different. It makes everyone think about, if you've made a 999 call yourself. I've made a few, and yeah, you get flustered and you say the wrong thing, but actually the importance of getting it right and how that passes on and affects what we do is really major. So it's all right. So let's move on to scene then. So you're on the way. You're arriving on scene. Particularly from you put the coordinates into the iPad, and then what happens on arrival, because it's often quite difficult to find exactly where the patient is, I think, isn't it?
It can be, and I'm just going to make a little bit of a plug for the What 3 Words apps. If anybody else has not heard of it, if you have a look on the App Store, What 3 Words, it's a brilliant app. It splits the whole world up into 3x3 meter boxes. And it will show you exactly where you are, and it gives you 3 words that determines that 3x3 meter box. So even if you're in the middle of a field somewhere near no roads, you don't know what town you're in, anything like that, you can open up the app and it may be like tree, lake, barge. And that will, if you say that to the ambulance service, What 3 Words, give those words, it will tell you exactly where you are. So I certainly carry it on my phone and get everybody or my family carry it on theirs in case there's any problems. So that location is key. We have an advantage with the helicopter of finding the scene. as a nice bird's eye view. We'll often get crews if they're already on scene, because we're quite often not first, because there are local ambulance crews around, to make sure they put their blue lights on, that they are visible so that we can spot where they are. And when we make that spot, it's quite often the pilots that make that spot. They have a much better view than we do in the back. The pilots will do a recce before landing. I'll perhaps let Martin talk a little bit more about that. But they'll also do a great job of working out our route to scene. So if it's not obvious, as we're getting out, they will be head off in the 12 o'clock, first left, then a right, and you're there, so that we know exactly where we're going to get to scene. Did you want to speak about the recce or anything, Martin?
Yeah, we have a mnemonic that we use, the 5S recce, and lately we've added a D to that as well, which I'll talk about. I think once we're overhead, the first one is the size, and it's typically the minimum size is about 28 meters of a diameter of a spot, so that's can be quite small for daytime. It's bigger. It's a bit bigger by night. The shape, we'll be interested in the shape of that landing site and how that correlates to the wind, actually, and we're sort of mentally plotting like dotted lines to how we're actually going to do a 3D model of how you're going to get into that site. The surround is important. Is it high trees, other houses, any other obstacles, wires, for example, power lines or masts? We need to identify all of those hazards. The slope can be a factor. We have limitations on a helicopter. Within certain parameters, we can't land on anything that's too sloping. And I will say that at night time, when we wear night vision goggles, the depth perception and also identifying a slope on a field is actually is quite a bit more challenging. What's the surface like? Is it suitable to land on? Is it boggy? That's really important. And also the one that's been added more recently in recent years is downwash. Modern helicopter types. We fly the EC-145 helicopter, and certainly the new variant we have, the Delta 3, has a maximum all-air weight of 6.8 ton, and you can imagine the downwash that something like that produces can damage property, blow fences over, blow people over. So and we really have to be cognizant of that. The last thing we want to do is arrive at a site and create more carnage, and we've come to actually help people. So that's important. And also access. It's no good landing in a field next to the job if people like Neil cannot get from the helicopter if there's a big fence in the way or an obstruction. So so that is what we're doing as we're in this. It's like a racetrack pattern overhead. All of these things are being assessed quite quickly, but we obviously are skilled and practiced at doing that. I think in terms of, you may have heard of the expression of CRM, crew resource management, and that is how we communicate in the aircraft. And that's really important. It's very much a team thing here, and it's communicating not only between the pilots up front, but the doctor and the paramedic in the rear of the aircraft. And we're having this conversation, this sort of flow of discussion, if you like, quite quickly before we then make that decision to land.
Cool, thank you. And then so if anyone's got any questions throughout as well, just put them in the chat box or feel free to jump in. But and then once you've landed, how do you work with other emergency services? You said, Neil, we're often not the first on scene, so other people are there. How do you coordinate with each other?
It's a real collaborative effort. Quite often, let's say, take for instance a car crash. More than likely there'll be ambulance service there, there'll be fire there, there'll be police there. Now we all have different roles, but we generally find whoever's lead for each sector, so the fire command officer or the policeman in charge, and we will meet with them and with the ambulance officer in charge, and we'll come up with a plan of what needs to happen. Now, quite often we find ourselves taking a lead in that situation because we will have the most information on what the patient needs there and then immediately. And we will be deferring to the other teams on how they're going to help us either get the patient out of the car or deliver us to the scene or whatever it may be. But it generally comes down to getting there quickly, making a quick patient assessment, deciding what other resources you need, and then pulling in the other specialties to make that happen. It comes back to that crew resource management and human factors. You've got to be approachable. You've got to be able to get on with people. You've got to almost make instant, bonds with people that you're going to work really hard with in a really intense situation. And you generally find that everybody on the air ambulance, pilots, doctors, paramedics, we're all of a very similar, very kind of appears easygoing kind of personality. But that's because we want to get on with people so that we can do the best job. If you find that you're at loggerheads with people with different interests, it never works well for the patient. So everything's directed at doing the best for that patient.
Brilliant. And I think one thing you haven't mentioned is that EAAA crews go out to life-saving missions on average 8 times a day, but a lot of the emergency services, particularly the land ambulances that might be on scene, they might go out to one kind of major trauma incident every year, or 1 or 2 a year. So for them, they're really not used to being in that environment, whereas our guys are. So I think the feedback we've had when other emergency services have come into the base to see what we do and understand it better is that they're very happy once the EAAA crew arrive, because it means the experts in this particular field are there and they can kind of can crack on. So,
and sometimes we do nothing more than just enable crews to do what they actually thought was right but weren't confident enough to do it. So us being there saying, yes, look, we've seen this before, you may have not, but we know what to do here, and yes, you were thinking the right things, carry on, we'll stand with you, we'll watch, we'll back you up, but you carry on leading. So it's not always that we have to kind of fully take over, but it's generally just working as a team.
Brilliant. And can you tell us in a bit more about what we do bring to the party though, in terms of specialist equipment and kind of the skill that the team have?
So yeah, so the list is long, but we offer above and beyond what the ambulance service can offer, but we offer skills like sedation, surgery, right from minor surgical procedures to actually opening up the chest and operating in the field on the heart. We offer full anesthesia. We basically, if you can think of anything that you would be offered in a critical care, a hospital critical care, if you've seen loads of pictures during the COVID pandemic on the news, all those bits of equipment, all those lines, all those infusions, we can pretty much offer all of that from out of our bags and out of the back of the helicopter. The only thing we can't do is kind of significant radiology, so CT scans and that kind of stuff. We carry ultrasound, so we can look inside the body as well as from the outside. We now insert arterial lines, so we monitor blood pressure with every beat of the heart. That also allows us to sample blood, to measure oxygen levels, all of this stuff that can't normally be done. Just anesthesia and being able to intubate the trachea and ventilate properly, that's actually a skill that's been taken away from the standard ambulance paramedic because of safety concerns with it. So actually now we're the only ones that are able to do that. We carry cardiac massage machines that are automated. We carry specialist ventilators for adults and for pediatric patients. We carry infusion pumps. We have a lot of equipment, and it's all for we have to carry a lot of equipment, but it's because we could go to anything. There's nothing out there that we say, oh no, we don't do that. We have to be there to treat every patient, when they really need us.
And so once we have, or you're in the process of treating the patient, if we move on to kind of next steps now then, and thinking about getting them from this on-scene emergency department that's arrived and the heroes, and then we think about how we're going to get them to the most relevant hospital. Can you just talk us through some of the decisions, the things that are thought about in that decision-making process of do they go by helicopter or land ambulance? And one of our guests has asked a question about turbulence around tall buildings and landing in the square in Holt Marketplace. And so perhaps, Martin, you could add in there something about the fifth blade as well.
Yes, well, first of all, that's a very good question. The aircraft, the upgraded D3 variant with the fifth blade is there's no real change in the size. I think there's a slight reduction in the actual length of the rotor blades, but to all intents and purposes, we need what we call 2D, or effectively twice the length of the helicopter, which is about 28 meters as a minimum. That's for daytime. It needs to be bigger for night. But that isn't the only thing. As I mentioned, our 5S recce turbulence downwash is a big factor, and it would also depend on the wind direction of the day, because the downwash tends to get, the wind will blow that in a certain direction and direct the downwash in a certain area, and if there is something there that we consider will be blown away, then we'll try to avoid that. That specific question, the answer is maybe. I think we have to weigh all these factors up. Ultimately, we can land somewhere else if it's a bit further away and arrange for what we call a secondary pickup, where a police crew or an ambulance crew would come and meet our clinical team once we've landed, and then drive to the job. So there's many ways to skin a cat, but definitely we have to think carefully about these things. The question you raised about the upgraded helicopter, the D3, it really wouldn't change much in terms of the decisions about landing. One of the benefits of having that fifth rotor blade is that the aircraft is less susceptible to turbulence, to wind gusts, and ultimately it's a much smoother aircraft and a lot less vibration. So not so much for the decision to landing, but it would certainly help with carrying patients in the back of the helicopter.
And I think, Holly, your other question was about decisions on where we go. Now, decision making, I often, when I started my pre-hospital career, I was worried about the medicine. I was worried about, would I know how to treat whatever condition that any patient had. Actually, I very quickly realized that that's not the worry. The worry, the medicine is the same as in hospital medicine. It's how to deliver that medicine in what is an austere environment. You know, patient may be upside down in a car. That's very different to being laying on a stretcher in a hospital bay. So that kind of the decision making is the hard bit. Then working out what a patient needs, which hospitals offer the facilities to fulfill those needs, and then can you get that patient there in a timely fashion. So a lot of things come into the decision making about where we go. It won't always be the nearest ED, because it may be that they don't offer the correct care. So if we're looking for, say, we think there's a brain injury or a cardiac arrest or some heart injury, then we'd be looking to go to somewhere that maybe has neurosurgery, like Cambridge, or we may, if we're thinking of cardiac arrest, we may want to go to one of the cardiac arrest centres like Norfolk and Norwich, or Basildon, or Papworth. So my first priority is, what does the patient need? Where's going to treat them best? We then have to say, well, what's going to be the safest way of getting them there? Now, the helicopter is generally the fastest way, although we do have to take some time to load the helicopter and offload at the other end, which is quicker with an ambulance. So we do have to take those times into account. And I'd say probably if we're getting over if we're over a kind of 25-minute journey time by land, you start to consider using the helicopter. Other than that, we'd probably go in the back of an ambulance. Also, what's the risk to the patient? Now, the helicopter is a noisy place to be. We wear helmets. It's relatively cramped in the back, and some interventions are not as easy. You can't access your patient completely. So actually, we may decide, look, we've got a patient. They don't at the moment need this intervention, but they may deteriorate and may need this intervention. And if that risk is high, we may say, right, for this patient, although it's going to take us longer, we feel it'll be safer to go in a road ambulance, and we'll go with there. In that case, the normal ambulance crew will generally, one will drive the ambulance, the other one will assist us. The air ambulance team will be in the back with all our kit. and the pilots will then relocate the helicopter to wherever we're going to meet us. So it's a really complex decision making. It can take a lot of brain power, where and a lot of bandwidth when we have to kind of think about it.
And what are the additional challenges of flying at night with all of that as well? So for anyone who's missed it, we started flying at night or flying 24/7 last June 2021. So we're quite into that process now. But there's, as you said, Neil, there's a huge amount to think about anyway. What are the challenges of a day and night shift?
So I was actually fortunate that I managed to do the first ever UK night HEMS mission with my colleague Neil Flowers, and that was back in 2014. And there was a lot of build up, lot of training. Actually, I think the pilots have a lot harder time than we do. Generally, our equipment's the same. We just need a head torch. So I found if you've got a decent head torch, it can pretty much turn night into day, and we can do most things that we can do. But I'll let Martin talk about what is definitely more complicated.
Yeah, I think obviously with night we need to be a bit more careful with our selection of landing sites. Just as the red phone ringing in the day, but I will say that never changes. When I hear that red phone tone, my heart starts to beat, my adrenaline comes a little bit. You just kind of get used to it, but it does actually help with us just sort of focusing the mind in that moment. We do use Google Earth if we're at the base. We'll take that extra few minutes and I do find a few more moments spent planning at the base could save quite a bit more time once you get overhead scenes. So we will look on Street View, actually, on believe it or not, on Google Earth is wonderful, because not all wires, telegraph poles are marked on maps, even Ordnance Survey maps, and sometimes farmers put other obstructions, or not I'm going against farmers, but other kind of wires. So we will look on Street View if we can to have a look if it's safe, and also access for the team once we get there, i.e. getting from wherever we've landed to the job itself. We also obviously fatigue comes into it. It does get tiring. I've done some busy night shifts where I haven't actually slept through the night. So we need to come into work as rested as possible. We are allowed to take naps, but yeah, and actually that is a great benefit of being multi-pilot. I think it adds that extra safety dimension as well. So the challenges that come for night, I would say it's probably interesting to talk about what mitigation we have. We talked about the use of Google Earth. The iPads are brilliant with the maps. We have night vision goggles, and actually whenever I'm on a job at night, if we have a quiet moment, I will we have just local bystanders will come and be interested to have a look through them. They are amazing. The way they sort of illuminate what otherwise would be a pitch black field. And actually, they're very expensive bits of kit. And EAAA, East Anglian Air Ambulance, we have 4 sets of night vision goggles per base. Very expensive, but really required for the job that we do. We have a searchlight, a very powerful one on the helicopter, and also the clinicians in the back have monocles, which are just like night vision goggles, but a single tube, and they will be looking at the sides of the helicopter as well. And again, we have to assess the suitability of the site. So it is no doubt very challenging doing our recce of a site at night. And actually, I've landed and some bystanders, and this has happened a few times now, I would say, well, you've taken such a long time to land. Why were you going round and round in the overhead? And first of all, you feel a bit deflated that you come here to help people, and people are complaining that you took a bit longer. But actually, that's necessary. We need to make sure safety is paramount. So we need to take that bit of extra time to do our recce as well. I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And you mentioned about people maybe moaning that you're taking a while, but I bet the only person not moaning was the patient, who was just happy that they could see the helicopter trying to get there. And I'm very conscious we're going to run out of time, so I want us to have time for questions. So finally, kind of on this bit, you know, you've treated the patient, you've dropped them off at hospital. How the charity interacts with those patients after we've dropped them off has changed quite a lot in the last few years. I wonder if you could just tell us about that, and also crew care after admission. You know, the nature of jobs is extreme, as you know, we've heard, and you know, the mental health toll on crew members is really important to the charity. So just a bit about how we, you know, what services are available to help support with that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the since I've been with the charity, one of the massive advances has been in our aftercare team. We actually have a specialist aftercare team that will search out patient details, that will find out follow-up on patients, that will check how they are. And as crews, we carry cards that we can give out to patients and to give out to patients' family and say, look, you know, if there's any questions, anything you want to know, anything that we can help you with afterwards, give us a call. And that will go through to the aftercare team, and they will then be able to offer either help, counselling, support, information, or just to come and meet the crews, come to the bases, and actually see maybe, you know, what helicopter you travelled in. All this stuff can give closure to patients and just help them with their whole journey. We do have contacts embedded in hospitals to get feedback and follow up and see how our patients are doing, which is really, really important. The other one's a bit trickier, I think, is the mental health of crews. We're a team, and it's probably my favourite part of the job is being part of the team. It's such a great place to be, and everybody looks after each other, and everyone wants to see everybody do well. And we also, you'll find it's unusual that something that's going to upset somebody maybe not upset somebody else. I personally find that it's anything that's closest to my life is what upsets me. And we all know so much about each other that we actually know what's going on in their lives, so we can say, oh, actually, I think that job will have affected Martin, and we'll quite often give a call and see how people are doing. We've definitely had crew members that haven't been able to cope with the mental stresses and strains, and have stopped doing the job. I find myself, sometimes you don't realise you're under the strain until someone actually comes and says, look, are you okay? And we quite often hug it out afterwards. There's definitely tears shed on shifts, not in front of patients, ideally, but certainly when we get to base, hugs, bit of a cry, bit of a talk through the job can actually work wonders, because obviously we try our best to make every outcome be a happy one, but unfortunately the nature of the business is that they're not, and they can really get to us. And the difference I find within hospitals being sterilised, it's an environment that, you know, although the patient's new and the injuries may be new, the whole environment and everybody's face, everyone's doing what they normally do. When you go pre-hospitally to a scene, you see where it actually happened. You see their personal belongings, you see their family members, you see the look on bystander faces that have seen what's happened. It's much more kind of powerfully emotionally, but we're all aware of this, and we do try our best to look after each other. But yeah, sometimes it can be hard.
Can I just add that I've done a few jobs where we've got back from a job and actually said, you know what, we're offline for we all need to sit down, have a cup of tea, and just take a moment. So I think that's important as well, to recognise that it can be very upsetting and stressful as well. And just to add as well, it's wonderful when we have base visits that the charity organise, when people come and those stories of people who've recovered, and that, I think that's really helpful as well, to just see, you know, the benefits that it's having. It really kind of ties it all together and makes you know it's such a worthwhile job that's being done by the charity.
Yeah, definitely. And we haven't got time today to talk through kind of some of our patient stories, but I'll share some in an email afterwards. As they're definitely worth seeing, some of our write-ups. So there's loads more that we could cover, and we could probably have about 10 different back to basics sessions. But we're a bit over time already. Has anybody got any questions or anything they want to ask? No, you're all shaking heads. Okay, well, I suppose just to wrap up then, a little bit of practical stuff about us as, oh, go on, Neil, you've got
just
one.
got a tiny little thing to say, and it's just that we can't do any of the stuff we do without the likes of yourselves raising money for us. It's incredible. We are fully charitable funded. We don't get it from the government or anywhere else, and it really is down to you guys. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, seconded. Thank you. So we need to raise £15 million a year to keep our helicopters in the sky. As Neil said, we get no regular government funding. Everything is from the people of the counties we serve, which is Norfolk, Suffolk, Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire. Quite a lot of you are lottery members already, which is awesome. But you've got friends and family who maybe aren't in our lottery. And currently that's about 50% of our income comes from lottery members. So that's people paying just £1 a week to win prizes of up to £1,000. And another huge way we receive support is through legacies and gifts in wills. So 1 in 4 of our missions is funded by people leaving us a gift in their will, and often we know about that beforehand, which is great because we can really engage people in the charity. And if equally, sometimes we just get kind of a surprise message come through that someone's really supporting us in that way. So it's just another thing to think about. We couldn't do what we do without. We have a brilliant board of trustees, of which we've got Tom Wales here today. Hello, Tom. Who's they support the governance of the organisation and help guide us. And we also have nearly 250 volunteers who are incredible and give up their time freely, including you, Simon Delat. Thank you so much for joining us. They give up their time freely to help us get where we need to be. So. As Neil said, we couldn't do it without everybody. So thank you for your support. If you've got questions you think of afterwards, then please feel free to just drop me a note and I'll make sure that they get answered. As I said, there's a huge amount that we haven't been able to cover. So if you'd like to find out more, then also get in touch, and we'd love to host you in our bases now that they're open again after the pandemic to be seen. So yeah, we look forward to keeping in touch with you, and thank you as ever for your support.